Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Data Science Hangout. If you're joining for the first time, it's great to meet you. I'm Rachel, and I'm the host. As I mentioned last week, it's really nice to be able to share some space with everyone right now. So we do want to reiterate and share again some of the avenues to help those that are affected by the war in Ukraine that have been shared by Virla and Sep, but also ask others to share in the chat as well. Thank you, everyone. If this is your first Hangout, this is an open space for the whole data science community to connect and chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and what's going on in the world of data science. So we want to create spaces where everybody can participate and we can hear from everyone. There's 3 ways to ask questions, probably more. You can jump in live and raise your hand on Zoom. You can put questions in the Zoom chat. And feel free to put a star next to it if you want me to read it out loud, if it's maybe loud where you are or something like that. But we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously. And our team will share that in the chat in just a second here. Just like to reiterate that we love to hear from everyone, no matter your level of experience or area of work too. But with all of that, I'm so happy to be joined by my co-host for today, Kristi Angel. Kristi is a senior data scientist, interview coach, and data science mentor at what says on the website Grubhub. And Zach already stole it from me, but congratulations are in order for your new role now at Stitch Fix. So Kristi, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your role.
Sure, thanks for that, Rachel. Yes, I'll be joining Stitch Fix on their A/B experimentation platform team. I probably shouldn't preface that with A/B because I'm assuming it does a little bit more than just A/B testing, but I don't quite know yet, so we'll see, TBD. But as you might imagine, my background is specialized in experimentation, data science, and inference, causal inference. I started in experimentation back in 2016, right after I graduated with my master's in statistics. I started at Groupon, and at the time, web-based experimentation was not it's not what it was today, I'll tell you that. I remember right before I interviewed for my first job, I Googled, optimize experimentation, web experimentation, and found very little information, and now it's everywhere. So I feel like I kind of lucked into a little niche. That said, in my free time, there are several other things that I do to contribute to the data science community. One of those things is that I am a data science mentor through a boot camp called Thinkful. This boot camp, I mentor data scientists and data analysts. The thing that's unique about this particular program is that we pair students with mentors in addition to their full-time or part-time curriculum that they choose. So they really get to work with somebody in industry, understand how data science is actually applied and how that's different than a classroom environment. And then the other thing that I've been a little bit more focused on recently is interview coaching for that same student population. So I primarily work with data analysts and data science graduates from boot camp programs, and I conduct mock interviews with them because a lot of these students and candidates are fresh out of this boot camp. They might be career pivoters. They could be PhD students who are looking to bridge some skills gaps. They might also be, just right out of undergrad, or maybe they didn't go to college at all. I actually had a student recently who was in the military, and then he came out and did a boot camp. And so there are just a lot of different needs, but I would say there's also a lot of anxiety around the mystery of what comprises a technical interview. And so I think one of my favorite parts is just getting people to a place where they're feeling confident in their interviewing ability. And that is it's a lot of just recognizing that anxiety that's there. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristi. While we're waiting for questions to come in from everyone, I'd love to learn a little bit more about that and maybe some of the tips that you share with people when you're coaching them for interviews, or how you help them get over that anxiety?
Excuse me. Absolutely. So, I think one of the first things that I always like to do is just kind of put out my feelers. And the way that I do that is I come right out and say, if you're anything like me, I am a nervous interviewer, like I just put it right out on the table and make it okay to fess up and say, me too. That way we can just kind of talk about the elephant in the room and bring the level down a little bit. I also think that my interview style it matches the interview style that I like to be interviewed with, which is conversational. It's collaborative, and I'm not gonna ask questions like, guess what number I'm thinking. I do want to understand your thought process, but if you get stuck, I don't want to watch you. I'm not going to leave you to struggle. I'm going to nudge you forward. And really, it doesn't take a lot, but I think realizing that that's all it is for people is really, really helpful, because I think they get caught up in this data science universe where it's like, well, they could ask me anything. They could, but they're probably going to focus on the job description in your resume. So let's narrow the focus and just bring it down a little bit.
Do people do that then when they get to their interview?
I have seen a lot of success. I really, really have. I offer all of the students that I interview to connect with me on LinkedIn, and keep me posted. Some do, some don't, and that's okay. But I love seeing my success stories. There was a candidate that came in to me a couple months ago, and I had to escalate actually, because I got about 15 minutes into this mock interview, and I realized that this person was going through some real trauma. He had signaled a couple of times, like, I've been working so hard for so long, or, I've just been struggling for so long. And it really struck a chord with me, because I also come from a background where I kind of had to bootstrap myself up a bit. I was a waitress for 20 years while I put myself through school. I'm the first person in my family to graduate from high school. There are some days where, on my path, it was really, really hard. And so when he said that, it just connected with me. And I put my interview notes away, and I was like, this is a different conversation that we have to have. And so, we talked about it, and he had this, I don't even want to call it imposter syndrome, because I think it's more than that, but it turned out he didn't have a college degree, and he had military experience. And he was afraid that by submitting his application and getting through an applicant tracking system, that he was automatically going to be bounced away. And I said, that's fine. That might be true, but that's not what we're going to do, because that's not how you're going to get a job. And we talked about it, and I was supposed to spend an hour on the phone with this kid. I spent an hour and a half talking him through it. And I said, I think about halfway through, I'm like, you've got yourself a mentor. Like, I'm just married to this right now. But 2 weeks later, he got a job. He just needed a confidence boost. There's other people, they need to work on some SQL skills, but being able to identify those weaknesses early on really sets them up for success in a good way.
That's amazing. It brings up a point I know we had talked about earlier as well. Like, when people don't have degrees and they're kind of hitting that roadblock in recruiting and not getting through to the hiring manager, what can we all do to change that?
That's interesting, because I did have another student. She is one of the most tenacious, hardest workers, committed learners. I mean, she would run laps around me. I was so amazed at her tenacity. And she was going to Grace Hopper. She was going to all the conferences, talking to as many people as she could talk to, doing everything right. But she had a political science degree. And I think, she was pie-eyed and talking to a lot of big tech companies, not really realizing there were other avenues. But she was getting shot down automatically by a lot of companies because they were saying that she didn't have a STEM degree. And I was really frustrated. Like, part of me was like, I want to find out who those recruiters are, because I thought those same companies said that we don't need degrees anymore. And so I feel like there's this like, a misalignment of, well, what do we want from our data scientists? And also, I think there's sincerely a knowledge gap in some recruiting teams that we can help with too. And that's something that I always try to do, because I end up going to all the college recruiting events that I can, but just educating your recruiters on what different flavors of data science look like and where they might come from.
I absolutely love what's happening in the chat right now. Everybody's sharing their majors as well.
Love
it. Great point.
Yeah, no, social science. I love working with social science teachers. I was a stats grad student, but I have a lot of sociology PhD envy. I'll admit that.
Does anybody have experience with like working directly with the recruiting team at your company to kind of say like, hey, this is something we might want to look past here and change the way we're doing
it? The company I work for, State Space Labs, is, I think, unusual. The founder himself is the first person in his family to have a college degree, bounced through several community colleges, ended up with a PhD in neuroscience. So, this is coming from the top down, as you can imagine. So the idea of what degree you have is pretty much irrelevant at the company, whether it's somebody who's being hired for engineering or data science or anything. We have plenty of people with military backgrounds. There are people with high school degrees who work at the company, but I fully understand that this is really, really unusual. And, I think we're lucky that we have the CEO that we have. And I'm not sure how you convince people that, it's really not just okay to look past the degree, but probably a really good idea in many cases, that you need diversity of thought and background in order to, especially if your company has a consumer-facing product and you want the company as a whole to have empathy for end users. I think it's really important to have a really varied set of life experience backgrounds. But yeah, I'm not really sure how you convince people at a more traditional company that it's a good idea.
That's awesome that your company does that though, Jenny.
I love that.
Yeah. Does anyone else have thoughts on this topic? Oh, I see Matthias, you have your hand raised. You want to jump in?
Yeah, so we we are a small startup in the women's health space, and we kind of look beyond degrees in a lot of ways. A lot of our more senior data science people have like a biology degree or something like that, right? And it's really more about what they've done in their previous jobs, because we need them to be effective from day one. But for the more junior folks, it's kind of difficult, right? So what we find is a lot of people with degrees, even if they have a degree, they're not very good, right? But when you're more junior and then on top of that, you don't have a degree, we just don't find a lot of talent, right? We don't find a lot of people that are very good with that, right? It's not like we would be opposed to that, but the degree and the experience gives you a little bit of a certification, right? It's a little bit easier to say like, okay, these are the people that we should talk to, because in a startup, there's always more to do than you have time, right? So if you go really in depth with like 5 candidates or 10 candidates, that's a lot of drain on the organization, right? So you're trying to use these degrees as a little bit of a filter to see who we can talk to quickly.
I think that's a good call out in the startup space in particular. It's a little bit different of a situation because, like you said, you need people who can be effective from day one, hit the ground running. And in that case, maybe that's where interns come in at a certain maturity once you get there. But it's definitely one of those things where when you can take on a junior level person, I mean, we still have to hire junior level people because we're all going to get older. It's just not a sustainable model if we don't. And so I love seeing certain organizations that do that intentionally, think about like the bandwidth that they have to be able to train in-house. And I've seen some companies launch programs successfully to do that.
I see there's a few other hands raised too. Mike, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to ask Kristi about, well, first, if I can make a comment and then ask a question. Comment is you clearly are helping candidates and kind of training them how to do interviews. Are you also training interviewers? Because, I think a lot of interviewers could do with a bit of skills.
I agree with that 100%. So when I was at Groupon, my job before my last job, GovHub, that was something that I was involved in towards the end. I was working with, we had, similar to Amazon, we had what we called a bar raiser program. And so one of the things that I wanted to see happen, I helped to ensure that all interview loops had a diverse representation from the interviewers. That was something that was happening at a certain level above at one point, or on my team, because I would track down the recruiter and insist on it. But the other thing that we were working on is extending the bar raiser training program more broadly to like some of those core principles and tenets to all interviewers, because interviewing's hard. I mean, I think I got thrown into it when I first started doing it. So I always interview from the perspective of kind of an interviewee, is, how do I want to be treated? And I think that makes it hard for me. It's one of those things that I still to this day second guess, is that external validity. It's like, was it me, or was it my question, or was it the candidate? And that's not a good place to be in, because this is someone's livelihood that you're handling, and I take that very seriously. So I think that you're right. We all need to learn to become better interviewers. It's I think that we make these really complicated frameworks for interviewing, when really, if we just had some, that's what I'm looking for, thoughtful and meaningful conversations with people about what they've done and what they know and how they think about things, and we might get a bit further.
It'd be really nice to hear, what are the kinds of conversation starter questions, or, things that, because as an interviewer, you want to get a feel for whether that person has skill or even just personality to deal with the job you're interviewing for. What are good starter questions that, open them up to kind of go, right, give me the information, but let's do it in a way that isn't challenging or, difficult, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's supposed to be a little difficult, but it's more, as you say, it's a kind of, come on, just tell me.
So, yeah, I mean, the first thing you want to do is you want to try to put them at ease and develop some trust really quickly. And I wish I could explain to you how to do that, but I was a waitress for 20 years. And so that's literally the job is, hi table, how are you? And in 3 seconds, I have to assess, are you hungry, grouchy, happy? Like, whatever, what kind of mood are you in? And read the room. So I don't know how it practice, trial and error, making mistakes.
It's a skill.
It's yeah.
I've had that before in interviews. It's like, was I just really drained and being awkward at starting conversation, or was it just that we weren't connecting? And I'm like, I think maybe it was me, but
well, that's why I'm so glad that we have like panels though, because then you can kind of corroborate the evidence. And
yeah, definitely. Zach, I see you have your hand raised too. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just coming from someone that's, as I said, I don't go to university. In the UK, believe Mike is also from the UK. We have something called Apprenticeship. So you do 4 days working, 1 day learning. But the qualification isn't seen in the same way. It's basically, you basically just get 18 months, 2 years of experience, and that's how you sell yourself rather than the qualification. But I hope, coming from someone that, as I said, I know that from the position I put myself in, I don't want to go to university, so I know I have to work harder. I deal with these external stuff. I enter competitions and all that stuff. Like build shiny dashboards, models. But yeah, it's the instant rejection and all this, which sounds like, I completely understand it. If they're getting 100 or so applicants or 200, no one's going to be able to go through that. They have to have a minimum requirement, or yeah, as Matthias said, it's just someone's going to spend their entire week looking at one job, or 2 weeks, depending on how big it is. So I completely understand it, though. Which is why I've started looking at smaller companies, because they're more likely to take a chance, take a risk, have less applicants. So someone's going to be able to spend looking at it. And then hopefully once they go, actually, this person's got an interesting portfolio, then get myself into that. So that's what I've been looking at. I've only been looking for about 2 weeks now. So it's not like I'm expecting lots, but yeah, that's the way that I'm approaching it. I'm sure other people have got other ways that they're looking at it. So but yeah, just someone that's in this forward, give a different perspective.
Yeah, that's great perspective, Zach, and great that you're doing all those contests and stuff too, like Big Data Bowl. I know we mentioned, but Javier, I see you had your hand raised too. Do you have something to weigh in on this topic?
Yeah, I kind of had a question for Kristi, just to follow up to all these discussions, because I've experienced this myself 2 occasions in my career, in my life. Years back, I was super unhappy in a job, and I was so busy with that job that finding interviews or getting interviews, applying for jobs felt exhausting. And kind of like a parallel to this, I eventually quit that job and went back to grad school, because I was like, okay, I'm not getting the types of jobs I want. I was reading and learning all about predictive modeling without even really knowing what it was. I was just very interested in the way people were presenting on this topic. So I went back to grad school, and I experienced like significant interview fatigue. I mean, the first month or 2 were very exciting. You're applying to positions, but after a while, it becomes sort of taxing, because you're like, okay, I have to sound excited about this job. Like, it no longer becomes fun on a regular basis to interview and learn about these companies. I don't know what the right answer is. Like, I've thought about this a lot, but do you have any guidance for people that are, students who are kind of feeling this fatigue, or just people unhappy in their current job, or like Zach, not to put you on the spot, but someone like Zach trying to break into the space and applying, position after position?
yeah. I mean, I'll tackle the breaking into the space piece first, because I think it's sort of a slightly different problem. I recommend to all of my mentees, like I mentioned, the fellow who didn't have a college degree either. When I said we're not going to go through applicant tracking systems, what I meant was we're going to network. And I don't like the word networking because I think it automatically puts people at kind of like, oh, I don't want to do that. But utilize LinkedIn as a social media, a professional social media site. Find people who are generating content that you find compelling and interesting. Find your tribe. Once you find your tribe, or as you begin finding your tribe, engage. They're going to start knowing who you are by your comments and your feedback and your ideas that you're contributing. And then, believe it or not, you're going to start building a reputation for yourself. It's just how human relationships work. You don't mean to be doing it, but you just being you, that's what happens. That's how I got my job at Stitch Fix, honestly. I had followed my new boss, Eric Weber, on LinkedIn for some time. I really align with his style of leadership. When I think about the kind of leader that I want to be, I want to be like Eric. And so we stayed connected. Now I'll address the other question that you had, Javier, which was, the interview fatigue. And I can speak to this personally because I was laid off in 2020 due to COVID in April. In fact, I had the great fortune of graduating in 2010 during the housing market crash, not knowing what I wanted to do. And then, anyways, interview fatigue. I interviewed for 7 months in 2020. I was planning to leave Groupon and move on to my next journey, or the next step in my journey. I think I had already been planning that at the beginning of 2020. And then once I started applying and COVID started, the rug just got pulled out from underneath me because the entire market changed. Where I thought I had a leg up, all of a sudden got very, very competitive. And then also what was happening behind the scenes that made it incredibly frustrating was that different positions were being combined or pulled because nobody knew where the pandemic was going to go. So talk about frustration. I made it all the way through full rounds with Pinterest twice, and I think 5 times with Facebook in a matter of a couple months. So I get fatigue, but I think personally what I can say is when I finally felt the most successful or the most at ease was when I just gave into it. It's like, okay, I've done all the hard work. I've prepared all I can prepare. Now I just have to show up and be the most authentic me that I can be. Like, I just need to bring her along for the ride, because if she shows up, then I'm good. But that's where the problem comes. Is like, is she going to come today? So I think it's just making sure that you're taking care of yourself enough so that you can be there. And I think the other thing is just being really candid and honest with your recruiting partners. I think people forget that they are your partners. And so always advocate for yourself with your recruiters. If you wake up on the day of your interview and you're in a panic attack, or, any number of things that could happen these days, right? There's no shame in rescheduling. They want your best self to show up too. They want you to get the job. They don't want to continue interviewing forever. They have work that they want to do, and they want you to come along and do the work too. So I think for me, that was what really unlocked progress for me. And it helped, bring joy back into it, because it helped me connect with my why.
That's great, Kristi. I can see in the chat too, it's resonating with a lot of people. And I can't read the chat right now, but I love seeing you all talking to each other. I want to make sure to get to some of the anonymous questions that were asked too. And this is actually a follow-up to the question now, but how do you stay motivated and optimistic while looking for a job after like a certain number of rejections or ghosting from a company?
The first thing I do, there's a couple of things. The first thing I do is I allow myself a day to grieve and just feel the way I'm gonna feel. Like I've seen people who can knock out interviews back to back, you know, and even I've seen people do 2 final rounds in one day. That's not me. I mean, I'm resilient, but like I also need my space to work through my feelings. So if that's you, that's okay. I have a dog who looks like a Muppet. He helps a lot. He gets me out of my head when I just want to like curl up in bed. I still got to take care of him. So that helps. And he's just goofy and he makes me laugh. So that's nice. Yeah, I gotta be honest, like you really gotta hunt for positivity these days. But where you can find it, take it and just kind of relish in it for a little bit.
Definitely. I see, Matthias, you're smiling and raising your hand too. If you have
Yeah,
something to add there.
I just think that's such good advice, right? And I think one thing probably also to always keep in mind, the people on the other end, the people who hire you are human, right? So there's a lot of people who are also, and I'm sorry to say this over and over again, there's a lot of people who are not good at their jobs, right? So if they don't hire you, there's a lot of people who don't do the diligence, they don't put the work in to find the best candidates. So it's not you, right? I think that's always important to keep in mind. And then when you do work with good people and they don't hire you, and that's also not a bad thing, because if they know what they're doing, then they know that you're not a good fit. That doesn't say anything about you as a person. That just means, hey, in this position, our assessment is you might not be as successful as you want to be. So, take that. I know this is like super hard to take it as that, but that is also a positive. Trust them, right? So if you work with good people, trust their judgment. If you work with bad people, just brush it off. It doesn't matter. Move on to the next thing. Get your feet in the door. Once you have the foot in the door, do the best thing you can and build your expertise. That's at least from the other side, from the side that hires people. I don't know if that matters or not.
And I would add to that, like it can be hard to take the ominous, like not a good fit, because it's vague and it's like, well, I thought I was a great fit, it's not specific. But if you can imagine some realistic scenarios, for example, like, I mean, I've had not a good fit right now. And when companies are able to give that kind of feedback where, for example, I'll give an example. I interviewed with Netflix in 2020. It was one of the first interviews that I did, because in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to get that job. And so I figured it would be a practice interview, right? Well, first of all, it still feels crappy when Netflix, even if you don't think you're going to get the job, when Netflix tells you no, you're still like, well, if I can't get the job I don't want, how am I going to get the job I do want? It's it is a constant mind game, and it's a mind game that you have to outsmart yourself at, really. But I think the other thing is, what helped me so much in this interview round where that I just went through, that same recruiter reached back out to me, now a year and a half later. They remember you. And apparently what I didn't know at the time was, and this is so funny to me, apparently I nailed the statistics round, which I think was the one that I thought I did the least well in. And it just wasn't as efficient in SQL. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, I can practice SQL drills more, but that was it. So I mean, that felt great to know that like I was that close, and getting that feedback helps because you're like, okay, I'm not far off. I am on the right path. People do like, what I have to contribute, but they just don't need me right now, or they need something slightly different.
Yeah, and if you work with a good company, they're always happy to give you that feedback, right? If you ask, right? No one likes to have that conversation unprompted, but if you ask them like, hey, what was it? They will always have constructive feedback there.
Yeah.
Kristi, Robert and I were talking a little bit earlier on Slack about like red flags to look out for when you're interviewing with a company.
Yeah.
And I think right now, like we see a lot of recruiter emails from people, and maybe it promises huge salaries, or like, how do you decide which opportunity to take or to interview for out of some of the others?
Yeah. Okay, hang on. Let me just jot this down because those are, I think, two really good questions that I want to address separately. So red flags, and then there was I'm sorry, what was the second question?
How did you decide which opportunity to go after or to take?
Yeah. Okay. So first, let's start with red flags. For me, it depends on like what your values are, right? For me personally, things that I value in a position are, immediately having that feeling where I can be my authentic self, that like I feel that natural ease of communication, maybe sense of humor, some laughter. I want to know that like we can work together, and I like to work in a fun environment. I like to bring a sense of humor. And so just making sure that like we're on the same page there, because like this is what you get, like what you see is what you get with me, and I'm very upfront about that. So I'm particular. I value people with diverse backgrounds, so a diverse team. I value learning. I value building for the long term. I value innovation. I value, so I think about my values, and I'm trying to find a team that fits with that. And I knew a lot about Eric going in, so that one was a no-brainer for me. In fact, like I approached him because I wanted to work with him before. So I try to shop for managers. If I'm honest, if I can, I will always shop for a manager. And if I feel like I'm not like connecting culture, like on the same page with in terms of culture, that's where all my questions are going to go. If I don't get a sense of that from them immediately, I'm going to ask about it. And my favorite questions is just, can you describe your team culture? Unsurprisingly, the same person who introduced themselves as a Princeton PhD struggled to define their team culture. So, to me, that was a red flag. I'm trying to think of other, like, I look for managers who really care about growing their team members. I think some managers forget that's part of their job. And that's okay, because managers also are new managers sometimes, and maybe are not supported the way that they need to be supported. But those are the things that I look for. And if I'm not getting a vibe that's there, I'm gonna keep moving. What factors? So those are some of the factors that drove my decision. Early on in my job search, I was really torn because I was unsatisfied where I was, for no reason other than just like personally, I think logistics is kind of boring. It's like a bunch of timestamps, and it doesn't. I want to see like more direct impact on people. And to me, as someone who's worked on experimentation platforms, The people I impact are my colleagues, my stakeholders. So I have a special place in my heart for internal tooling. And I think I for a long time, I grappled with that point because I felt like I wasn't a whole data scientist because I had never done more algorithmic data science or machine learning. I've never put a model into production. But my last project at my last role was putting together an experimentation training program. And I got to write and I got to teach and I got to just like brain dump all of the things that I know about experimentation. And I think simultaneously, I've been really struggling with trying to understand what confidence is. Like at the core, what is confidence? And when I was observing myself just fluidly explaining what experimentation is and how to do it to non-technical people in a very like plain and simple way, I was like, wait a minute, this is confidence. I'm being confident right now. And so I just realized like, this is what I know how to do well. And I'm at the point in my life, you know, I don't have enough time to be an expert in everything. And so maybe I just be an expert in testing and I can collect more hobbies and do fun stuff on the side and enjoy life.
I love that. Finding the area that you're confident in. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's quite a few anonymous questions too. I don't want to miss. Let me just jump over. Sorry, I was like going back and forth. Someone had said, I have been working as a data scientist for 3+ years now, but I'm feeling my experience doesn't look valuable to recruiters, just assuming from low calls. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah. So when I kind of approach this problem as a data scientist, and I think, you know, if you're blind or if you're just kind of cold applying, you know, through company websites, you know, then you want to target the top of the funnel. Maybe take a look at your resume. Maybe see if you can get some resume reviews from colleagues or peers that you trust, and see what their thoughts are. If there's a way that maybe that might be more effective. But again, I still think that if you can get referrals or your, like I said, your resume into the hands of a hiring manager. There's lots of hiring managers on LinkedIn right now that are blatantly advertising for roles that they're trying to fill. So take advantage of that. But if it's not a resume problem, you know, and it really is just a matter of thin content, you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can fill that out. So let me think here. I mean, there's definitely projects that you can do on your own. There are volunteer organizations where you can join as part of a team to do projects. I know Data Science for Social Good has an offshoot, but I can't remember the name of it. Maybe we can look that up later and share that out. But look for volunteer opportunities, because then you have the good fortune of learning from other people as well. I think going to meetups, particularly the Python and R meetups, if you can, another really great way to network and form community. But you know, you just try to build communities of people who are willing to vouch for you and pass your resume along, because that's the best way. Yeah, I think. And then like in the situation that you're in, if you have any say about the projects that you're working on, try to be strategic. See if there's other projects that you think are valuable that someone's working on. See if you can ask your manager if you can be a part of that in a small way.
Definitely. That's great, Kristi. And I can't speak for everybody here on the call, but I love the community feel of this too. And I'm sure there's a bunch of people on this call right now who'd be willing to like take a look at your resume as well and connect with you. But I do want to say, if anybody is in that position right now, feel free to shoot me an email too, and I'll try and help you connect with people as well. People reach out all the time on LinkedIn that are on the other side too. They're hiring for roles and they just can't find people, and there just seems to be this mismatch happening. But yeah, definitely feel free to reach out to, or if anyone wants to put in the chat if you're willing to connect with someone too. Ismail, I know you had a somewhat similar question too, so I just wanted to see if you had any other follow-up to add too.
Kind of. My question was like for data science roles, I see a lot of requirements for like PhD or masters. And I currently, for example, have a bachelor's degree and have like some experience as a data analyst. So just trying to see what will be like the best bridge between don't having a master's to fulfill to that. Like I'm currently trying to build a GitHub repo very slowly just because life, but other suggestions would be really appreciated, and thank you.
I mean, it sounds to me like you are already, you know, your head's in the right place and you're thinking of the right things. I mean, I'll be the first one to note that, like, I don't have a public GitHub repo. You know, I choose mentorship and coaching as the way that I contribute. So I don't have a lot of time for my own projects, which is I don't know, mixed feelings about, but anyways, you know, I think that it can be very effective though, in terms of like showing what you can do early on, and getting yourself from the analyst to the data science position. You know, there's one like kind of odd habit that I have, at least I think it's odd, maybe other people won't, but I have a permanent job search alert in Google Jobs. You know, what I'm interested in is experimentation, but you know, you might be interested in finance or something different. And so, you know, a couple keywords, and I just have it come to my inbox, you know, weekly or some cadence. The reason why I do that is because it helps me stay fresh with what's going on around me, particularly if I'm not in conferences, or, you know, if I'm not able to connect with data scientists outside my company. It helps me keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry in terms of skills people are looking for, the way that data science is kind of starting to form into different subspecialties. And the reason why I'm recommending that is because of that skills-based focus. When you start looking at a lot of job descriptions, you start to pick up on those patterns. And so you'll start to pick up on what kind of a data scientist you want to be based on what you like to do, but you also get a better sense of what kind of skills they're looking for and where you really need to focus in on. I don't know if that's helpful.
It is. No, I appreciate that. It's always good to hear different points of view because you could have missed something. Like I was reading a lot from the chat, and I was like, a lot of people had great suggestions too. So it's
good.
Thanks, everyone. Jenny, I see you have your hand raised. If you want to jump in.
Sure, thanks. This is about resume review, kind of mentoring / resume review. So yesterday, we have a couple of open positions at our company in data science and analytics, which I will share. But I got forwarded a resume by a friend of a friend saying, is this person qualified for one of the roles I'm seeing? And so I looked over the resume and noticed immediately, she had listed the bullet points under each of her job titles. She was listing them in ascending order of importance or impressiveness. So the things that were most impressive, she was putting last. And she was also, in some of her bullet points, she was sort of being really deferential to her colleagues. Like, I've been working under my mentor to do this, and then I looked at her LinkedIn page and saw there were a bunch of accomplishments and job responsibilities that were really impressive, that were listed on her LinkedIn page, and that hadn't made it onto her resume. So my answer was, I'm not sure whether or not she's qualified for this job, but forget about that. She really needs to overhaul her resume. It's not showing how great she is. And I gave, specific advice, which apparently she really appreciated. But, it really hit me. What's a mechanism for this? I mean, it just so happened that someone forwarded me the resume and I was nice enough to take 10 minutes to do this, but not everyone is going to do that. And does anyone know of like a forum? Does our studio have a forum for this? Does Our Ladies have a forum for this? Because especially for people who are very uncomfortable with self-promotion, the resume just reeked of that. And I felt horrible. She was just really, really shooting herself in the foot. And I'm sure it's really common.
I'm not gonna lie, I was there myself when I first started looking for a job before grad school. I just didn't get it, it's funny to me now. I will share with people my very first resume that I was using, and I show them like where I started. I show them kind of somewhere in the middle where I was looking for an internship, and then I show them where I am now, and how it's evolved over time. But my thought process when I first graduated was like, well, I have a degree in physics. What else do you want to know? I could do anything, right? It was just so youthfully arrogant, but you gotta I take the time because I'm a sucker and I don't say no, and I'll help people. You need to make it easy for people to connect the dots, because that was not obvious to me before. I thought everybody could just connect the dots, and they were in my head or something like that. But what it is to me is indicative of someone who probably doesn't have a lot of confidence and is probably not in a good, when I see a resume like that, and then the difference, that probably tells me they're just not in good culture. They probably have never experienced good work culture. And I absolutely want to have a conversation with them and learn more about them, see how they sell themselves. But in terms of approaching the wider problem, I really love maybe Our Ladies supporting resume reviews as part of some of the chapters, if that's something they're interested in. You can always tweet at them ideas. I'm sure they're open to it. I'm not organizing right now, otherwise I'd take it there. There are a lot of preparation companies coming up, but at the end of the day, it comes down to people who can afford them, which doesn't feel great. So I think that maybe just we all take a vow to lead by example, and make a call to action on our own networks. Are you actively mentoring? Because you should be. It's our responsibility to bring up the data scientists of the future, and so we all got to chip in on that when we can.
Yeah, I did post about this on the Our Ladies New York City chapter Slack. Haven't heard anything back.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing the answer is, that's a great idea, Jenny. Why don't you organize that? And I know that's the answer. So.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we could probably look into too, as part of the data science Hangout website, or we'll chat more about that internally. And Jenny, maybe I can reach out to you to ask for some more information too. I'll also put that into the LinkedIn group too, and we can continue the discussion about that there as well. But along with Our Ladies, maybe also the R for Data Science online learning community Slack would be a good place to do that too. This hour is going by super fast. I just want to make sure there aren't questions that I've missed, because I see, Justin, you had put one into the chat with a star for me to read. So the question was, as someone new to this discipline, can you speak about the intersection of social science and data science? I'm especially interested in understanding which analysis might be most useful to learn as my company's survey guy / Milton from Office Space.
That's funny. Surveys are great to know because I think, when you're talking about the intersection of social science and data science, you start working with UX researchers, so the user experience. And there are a lot of companies that actually really double down on mixed methods research. So you have a data scientist working with a product manager, a designer, and a software development team. And they're a little squad, and they chip away at their corner of the universe. For example, I know Spotify is one such organization. And anybody who is looking to learn more about mixed methods research, centerstat.org is a small statistical group that does stats workshops, and the quality is amazing. So I know they have a course available, highly recommended. I haven't taken it yet, but I plan on it. Network analysis is another one. I don't think it's used much, right? It's not commonly used, but I can see more and more usage for network analysis in data science. It's one of those things where, and you'll see this in some of the courses, because they also have a network analysis course on CenterStat. I'm affiliated with them in no way. I just really do love their classes. But yeah, it's kind of the statistics question of how do you want to model your data? How do you want to understand it? And network science, network analysis is really a powerful dimension in that regard. But I think there's also just like a lot of value in having data scientists who understand, or even just thoughtful about the people part of things.
Right. That makes sense. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Kristi. I'm scrolling through to see questions from earlier, but just want to say, if anybody is still on and had a question that I didn't see, please feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand here and jump in too.
A lot of comments.
Hi, yeah, I have a quick question.
Mhm.
Sorry, I'm outside. I only logged in about half an hour ago now. It's been great to listen. One of the things I've been trying to figure out is how to benchmark your skill sets. So I've just finished a PhD in neuroscience, dealt with lumber, a lot of, very classical kind of PhD to data science. But I just struggle with kind of figuring out how competent I am or am not. And I was wondering if you have could you speak to that a little bit? Thank you.
You're welcome. That's a good question. I don't know what this says about me, but I've never asked myself that question. I don't know. I mean, like, I think that
Maybe I can just sorry.
go ahead. Yeah.
Without say just without just listing, do you know these packages? Have you applied these kind of methods to these that is one way I think to kind of do it. But I was just wondering if there is a better way to kind of figure out where you lie in the hierarchy of competence, in a sense, without that being a negative way, just in a way it's like am I 6 months of training away, or actually am I like a mid-level data scientist but just don't know the right labels outside of my niche?
Yeah. I kind of I don't want to say that you're wrong. So I don't want to say that this is like a wrong way to think about things, but I kind of want to encourage you to think about it a little differently, in the sense that, like, if you're always measuring in absolutes where you are, you're just going to be chasing a moving target forever. That goalpost is going to keep moving. There's going to be more and more and more and more. I mean, even just from the perspective of the technology front, when I started, we were in Hadoop, and I still have to like learn the AWS ecosystem now. And by the time I learn that, there will probably be something else, and we're all going to have to rebuild our data infrastructure again. If anybody's panicking, don't. I'm being I'm exaggerating, but but my point is that I like to measure myself a little bit more relatively. So when I read technical blogs, I'm not necessarily thinking about my skill set and like, if I'm solid enough in the tidyverse. What I'm thinking about is, what problems does my business need to solve? Do we have the skill set to solve those? Where are we relative to other comparable companies? Are they solving the same problems? Are they light years ahead of us? Or like, are we all kind of like figuring things out in the dark and making the same, like, similar decisions? And I've found it's been the latter for the most part along my journey, like going to conferences and talking to people who work in my space. I find we all kind of have the same struggles. And so to me, that tells me that as a team, we're doing all right. And that is what matters to me a little bit more. But I also have just kind of this like ominous confidence or faith. I'm not a faith-driven person in any way. I'm like, show me proof. But like, I do have this faith in that, if I'm doing the things that I like, if I'm solving problems that are actually impactful, then I'm doing my job, and it doesn't really matter how many packages I know.
That's a really nice answer. So that does help. It's just, I think it's finding the balance between overconfidence and like, okay, I don't know that, but I could give me a week and I can do that, versus being naive. I
think there's something that we can all just do as data scientists, and I think it's like we just need to stop this toxic, like, what do you know attitude, like, because that's not what it's about. One of the data scientists that I interviewed for my new role, she is one of the most well-respected data scientists in her company, and she comes from a statistics background. And I see it repeatedly, that inferential statisticians get judged differently than machine learning data scientists. And it creates all of this, like, this conflict and this, like I said, toxicity. And it's not a contest. We all have complementary skills. We can all learn from each other. So let's just do that instead of complaining about it, or saying, pitting people against each other, or suggesting one type of data scientist is less than another.
Thank you. Great answer.
Thank you, Kristi.
I
know
also
where
something really quick.
Jump in. Yeah.
I just think when interviewing, whether for data science or any roles, like willingness to learn and actually meaning it, like, is the biggest thing above the skills you already know or the skills you will know. It's just that, like, you're eager and you want to be growing into part of the team.
I love that.
So I don't know, that's something that I always try to get across when I'm interviewing, because I know I don't know everything at all. And I would like to, I don't know, grow in the position that I'm interviewing for.
That's a great point, Kate.
Agreed.
I know we are a little bit over here, so I want to see if you had a few more minutes, Kristi. Or do you have to run?
I don't have a job right now, so
You're like, yeah, let's talk all day. I see there was a anonymous question I had missed earlier that was, how do you think industry plays a role in data science hire? For example, moving from retail to tech or nonprofit to fintech?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I would be curious how other hiring managers think about this, because this is something that I've definitely struggled up against myself before I realized that, experimentation is going to be my path moving forward. I did apply for some growth roles and thought it'd be interesting because I really, like I said, I wanted to connect to that people piece. But the feedback that I got was they needed someone with growth experience. And I took that again as, well, they need someone who can hit the ground running. And that was exactly the feedback that I got. So once they have that first key, like senior hire, they can hire people that maybe have transferable skills. So, when you're doing that pivot, just keep that in mind, is that, the team does have a specific composition of experience they're looking for. And so, you might have to work harder for it, but you can get it. Does anyone else, though, have anything to contribute about sort of cross-domain data science hiring?
I think you made a great point that doesn't really get talked about enough, is that especially when you're coming from recruiting, you don't know how, like, one of the big questions that I ask at every interview is, what's the team structure? You don't know if you're the first person, they're starting a brand new team, or second, or however big the team is. So I think that's something that needs to be taken into account, is even if you're willing to show that you want to learn, for me anyway, I want to make sure there's someone else that I can actually learn from. I don't want to be just learning by myself. I want to have someone that's been there, done that. So that's a big part for me that I think that you briefly touched upon, but I wanted to touch upon more.
Excellent point.
So I think, from my experience, the more traditional the industry, I won't say the easier the interview is, but the less theoretical it's going to be. Like and I've interviewed with fintechs and everything else, and they want to get into this theoretical game, or they think you're some software engineer that's going to develop the new recursive algorithm to solve the traveling salesman problem. And that's what you're going to get focused on. Interviewing banking, insurance, healthcare, all these others, it's basic problem solving. Yeah, you go through a handful of those stats questions, can you figure out the average of, some money or whatever, and how would you segment customers going to a sports game? I mean, some stuff like that. Like, those are the how do you think generic questions, but they have and same thing. I mean, I've been a leader. I've seen hundreds of resumes and done quite a handful of interviews, and none of that stuff matters to me. Like, and I've seen it in a couple LinkedIn posts. Like, and the end of the day is, if it's on your resume, you should be prepared to be asked about it. Rule of thumb number one. Rule of thumb of your resume. I mean, I'm old school, so I transitioned from the military, and we used to always say, your resume should be the 3M principle: men, money, and machinery. How much did you manage, and what did you do with it? Laundry lists of job descriptions aren't going to get you anywhere. And to someone's point on here, putting your least significant thing at the bottom, disaster. And in fact, I'm reviewing some random person's resume on one of my Discord course channels, and they put all their courses up on page 1, and on page 2 is all their work experience. And they say to me, well, I'm trying to transition jobs. I'm like, no one's going to get, you're not going to get an offer. You're not going to talk to anybody. And here's why. And so it's, some things like that. And I always tell a lot of people, don't look for that entry-level data science job. It is literally the one in a million. Go for that marketing or that finance or that ops job somewhere basic where you're going to show up. Maybe they want you to run Excel all day, but you know what? You can go and run R all day and change the game. And I've done that at a couple places, and now you have bullets on your resume. You don't have to be there forever. The job you're taking isn't the rest of your life. The job you're taking is, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years, could be less. I mean, I've spent 1 year in many jobs.
And it goes fast.
Yeah. and there's no benchmark. Like I, one of the things, like, I don't believe in imposter syndrome. I know people feel it. I don't believe in it because you know what? There is always somebody that knows way more than you do down the road. So stop thinking about that. Do you have the skills and the requisite experience to do the job you're being asked? That's the question. And that's what you got to answer. And so, you didn't get asked to put a shuttle on the moon. You got asked to solve some basic business problems. And, that's it. And, think of yourself, can you do that? Are you solving those problems? And do you have experience to do it, or can you reach a little bit? I mean, I've never been fully prepared for every job I ever took because it's one of those, you have some basic set of skills, then you get there and you're like, oh boy, this is a bit more. So you grow a little bit. Like every new job should be a stretch, and if it's not, maybe you're looking for the easy one. I don't know. But every new job is that way.
And I'm going to record this as a pep talk anytime I feel imposter syndrome. Just play it.
We are not imposters. We just don't know everything. And that's okay. It really is.
Definitely. Sloan, I know you had a question earlier and I can't find it in the chat because there's so many awesome comments too, if you want to jump in.
Sure. Kristi, everything that you were saying about the people aspect of data science is speaking to me a lot. That's what I love the most about data science. And I also have most of my background in data science is also experimentation. But I'm fairly new into my career, and I already know that the people aspect is where I find the most value. And I'm starting to do a little bit of mentorship, but I'd love to hear more about your path and how you were able to mentor more people, and maybe some advice that you would give someone that knows that that's the path that they want to go down as well.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, like, my journey has been, I don't want to say, I don't want to say just luck, because there's a lot of hard work that went into it. But there's also a lot of luck, I got lucky while I was in grad school. I won't tell you my full journey because that would take way too long. We'll just say I went to, I think, 9 colleges and universities over the course of 13 years and 5 majors. So yeah, it's complicated, but like when I think about my journey, I got lucky with starting at Groupon because working there as an intern or a contract analyst is what it was while I was in grad school, allowed me to get in there and make some relationships. And so when I did graduate from grad school, I was lucky enough to already have established contacts there. So going back to, I don't remember whose point it was, but the idea that, those opportunities can come from anywhere. Being creative about where you look for opportunities. That internship was a Tableau gig. I was a Tableau administrator. It was miserable. I didn't like doing it. I didn't do it for very long, but it was the key that got me into my next job at Groupon. And I had actually worked with my hiring manager briefly, and I tell this story to him, he knows it, briefly before I left. And I remember I saw the job and it was his job opening, and I was like, oh gosh, Chris, he's kind of weird, is what my first impression of my future boss and mentor was. But I decided to do a Google search on him. And turns out that he is someone who really cares about building teams and trust and communication, and all those core tenets of what makes great teams great. And that's the thing that he is committed to. And so I had a great mentor right off the bat. Fun fact, he had, say, a 2-hour commute home, like to and from the office every day. He took the Metra in and out. And so on the Metra here in Chicago, he taught himself R so that he could be a better coach for me, knowing that I was a new grad in my role. And like, so that's the kind of boss you want to find. And that's how I got lucky. But part of it was intentional. I Googled him and he had an online presence. And I knew that that was his brand and that was what he was about. And I got a lot of growth there. I mean, he used to joke half-heartedly that, you know, he only knows 3 things. There's probably like 10 things. Neither of us have written them down, but those core tenets that he taught me, you know, about community, about growth, about resolving conflict, about, you know, learning and friction and building trust. Those are all things that I learned from him. So again, like I said, just build relationships and the rest is gravy.
Definitely. Thanks, Kristi. I like Zach's comment then. That's not luck then, it's research.
Fair.
Good job.
Well, if you would have heard my text screen, you'd agree with me that it was luck.
I see that people were commenting about different titles for data science jobs, and Libby said, yeah, call me what you want to call me. But I had a question. Someone had reached out to me from a large insurance company, and they have this role, data science engineer, that people just haven't been finding candidates for. And we were wondering if it could also be like that title doesn't come up as much for people in their job search.
Yeah. It's a lot of creativity in titles right now. I thought like we had kind of landed into settled territory, but there's what we've got data science engineer is a new one to me. I haven't heard that one. I think another one that's kind of controversial right now is decision science. What's the difference between a decision scientist and a data scientist? My last title was decision scientist, and I still can't tell you. My guess is that you tend to see decision science and logistics a little bit more. They tend to deal with metric soup more often. But yeah, I mean, I personally, I don't think titles are important. Again, like I'm focused on what I'm doing. And so if I'm doing what I want to be doing and I'm paid fairly, then that's what I'm mostly concerned about, and that I'm growing, that I'm pointed in the direction that I want to be, and that I'm making progress. But, you know, I guess I would ask myself, how is a data science engineer different from a data scientist? And what kind of a candidate are you trying to attract?
Yeah. I think it maybe could be a mismatch of the title, because I wonder if I think the role is actually for like administrating data science tools for their
I see.
name. I'm not sure.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I mean, I think that person would probably be a little bit more, if they're implementing data science tools or administrating and implementing, I've seen them usually as an analyst or a developer position. I think engineer, I think data science and engineer, it's like almost putting two really like not well-defined terms together, making it even less well-defined.
Yeah, maybe nobody's sure to apply for it.
Yeah, like I'm not sure what a data scientist does, and I'm not sure what an engineer does. No, but yeah, I think there's an opportunity to be a little bit more creative and targeted in there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I'm scrolling through the chat to see if there were any other questions I missed. Just want to put it out there to everyone to raise your hand if I missed you. I'm sorry if I did. I love this conversation today, Kristi. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
This is great. Well, okay, I'll give people a few more seconds to jump in with last questions. But Kristi, what's the best way for people to follow up with you if they have other questions? Is it LinkedIn or Twitter? What do you prefer?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. One of my goals this year is to figure out how to use Twitter. I've had a few false starts.
We can, I'll share your LinkedIn through the Data Science Hangout group, but also just want to remind people that we have that. So if there's certain conversations that you want to continue, there's the Data Science Hangout community group on LinkedIn. Let me put that in the chat here again. There we go. Thank you all so much for joining.
I do have one thing, if that's...
Oh, sure.
And it's having something in your background for a Zoom interview. I've got a football shirt back there, and interview, you can talk about 5-10 minutes. Talks about like getting you, they'll ask you about it, get you talking about it, and it helps you like sort of calm down. So because of course you're at home for Zoom interviews, you can sort of help dictate what's in the background. So that's something that I found quite useful.
That is a good point.
Project hot sauce professional.
I can talk about plants.
Aaron, I see you had your hand raised too.
Yeah, earlier when we were talking about LinkedIn, one thing I struggle with is what to put on LinkedIn versus what to put on your resume. Mine's kind of a jumbled mess. So do you have any kind of guidelines on how much you should put on LinkedIn versus your resume?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably depends on the depth and breadth of your background and what you want to highlight. For example, I'm not a PhD. I don't have a lot of research or publications to share. So for me, what I showcase is going to be a little bit different than what someone who comes from a research background might showcase. But I would say my LinkedIn profile is almost a carbon copy of my resume, just not as updated. Maybe a little bit more brief. No, it's the same, I think. I don't pay much attention to it, as you can tell. It has the essential information. And then a couple of maybe articles that I was featured in where I talked about the work that I was doing. Enough context so that somebody understands what it is that I do and what I have to offer. For me, I view my LinkedIn as a way for me to connect with people that I'm interested in connecting with, but also like, as far as I'm concerned, like it's also just the minimum information that a recruiter needs to like determine whether or not I'm someone they want to connect with. Like
I see some people literally just have a title and that's it, no description. And some people go into like a book for each position. So I just wondered if you had a preference.
I think that, I mean, because I have, and this isn't a humble brag, it's just, I have a ton of recruiters reach out to me all of the time. And I think that is an artifact largely of my network that I've developed. People that I'm connected to, the people that I maintain relationships, and my activity on LinkedIn. I think that those things all drive. I mean, it's not like my first job was at Facebook. My first job was at Groupon. You know, I mean, there was a moment there where they almost got delisted. It's not, I mean, they have a good reputation for developing good technical people. But it's not a huge successful name. So yeah, I put my effort into my personal relationships and my professional relationships.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I do think it's helpful when people like introduce themselves through LinkedIn too, and like the little bio that's there.
Yeah.
But it's nice that like you can include, I don't know, your favorite posts that will be featured at the top, so everybody sees those too.
Yeah, that's good advice. I didn't even know you could do that.
I think I spend too much time on LinkedIn. But also connecting with people that are in like the area that you want to get into too, because I think then if once you like their posts or comment on them, other people will see you in that area too.
They'll reach out and connect with you.
Yeah.
And
And while we're on the topic of LinkedIn, one other thing that I think is really helpful is if someone does connect with you, to always say like, thank you for connecting, and just open the door to conversation with them, because you don't know why they were coming to your profile, and maybe they don't want to just like reach out and ask you a question right away, but at least saying something to them kind of opens the door to that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kristi, for joining us and sharing all your insights. And thank you all for all the questions too.
thank you so much for having me.